Right, so Joe Biden now, after a year of atrocity being committed against Gaza by Israel, and after the horrific scenes at the Al-Aqsa hospital in central Gaza, it has to be said, has now turned to the matter of northern Gaza instead, and the increased strikes that have been happening there as Israel and Netanyahu seek to make the north of Gaza completely uninhabitable. Everyone still living, still hanging on in the north of Gaza has been told to leave, and if they don't, they will be assumed to be Hamas combatants. Israel is embarking on a complete ethnic cleansing on the north of the Gaza Strip and has said no aid will get in. People will be starved out if necessary. These are the plans he is apparently now considering. This has triggered Biden to, it would seem, accede to US law on such matters, the matters of arms sales and humanitarian aid being blocked, and has now come out and said that if Israel do not let aid in, then in 30 days' time arms sales to Israel will cease. For a lot of people, this will be music to their ears. For others, they might smell a rat, and they'd be right to, because this is absolutely not enough. There's a massive catch to all of this. The Biden administration's words on Israel have been utterly worthless up until now, and so this promise of Biden's would appear to be too. Joe Biden has been digging himself an Israel-shaped hole, which is now all his administration will ever be remembered for. He's not digging his way out, he's just digging in deeper. Right, so genocide Joe Biden is now, after all of this time, after all of the wanton destruction, all of the fatalities in Gaza, now talking about suspending arms sales to Israel if they don't let aid in, after they have admitted to holding up humanitarian aid to Gaza for quite some time. Israel's customary arrogant openness in regards to exactly the atrocities they are committing might on the face of it have blown up in their faces finally. But in actuality, this is likely to be little more than a PR stunt to try and win some brownie points back for the Democrats before the US populace go to the polls in their election next month. Now, where much of the focus has been on the events at the Al-Aqsa hospital in recent days, the images that have come out of that, seared into people's brains, will be memorable and go down in history as the ones that are going to stick around for the longest, I fancy, in relation to the entire atrocity that's been happening in Gaza over the past year or so. The stories of the people who lost their lives there have been dominating social media, if not mainstream media headlines too. They seemed more interested in naming Israelis who lost their lives rather than Palestinians, after all, a lot of the mainstream news channels, didn't they? It is the matter of northern Gaza, though, that is the more relevant given recent declarations about the nearly 2 weeks of rampantly increased attacks in that part of the Strip by Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu allegedly wants to empty the entire north of the Gaza Strip of Gazans and plans to do so by starving them out. This came out 2 days ago, and it seems to me to have been the trigger for Biden to make the announcement that he has now. However, there are big caveats which I'm going to come on to. It's a not well covered piece of news released by the Associated Press. However, I'm going to use an excerpt from Press TV instead to explain it, because frankly I thought it was a far more honest appraisal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is examining a plan to seal off humanitarian aid to northern Gaza in an attempt to starve out hundreds of thousands of Palestinians unwilling or unable to leave their homes. Under the proposed plan, seen by the Associated Press, civilians who remain in northern Gaza would be classified as combatants, allowing Israeli troops to kill them. They would be denied access to food, water, medicine and fuel. The plan proposed to Netanyahu by a group of retired generals calls for Israel to maintain control over the north for an indefinite period to attempt to create a new administration, splitting the Gaza Strip in two. Israeli media reported that Netanyahu told a closed parliamentary committee session that he was considering the plan. Now, the reason I chose the Press TV article over the AP version is that AP, like so many mainstream outlets, made the claim it was to starve out Hamas combatants and that anyone remaining would be considered Hamas. It skirted over the fact we're talking about ethnic cleansing here, and I found that enormously distasteful. Press TV told it far more like it was. It's everyone has to leave or they will be treated as Hamas. And we know what that means at the hands of the IDF. That bit of news I felt was a trigger, at least in part, for Biden to act as he is doing now, to say what he is saying now, and obviously we need to look at that too. It all comes down to a letter sent by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin, a lengthy one at that, as you might imagine it would need to be, to Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant and Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer in relation to Israel's pledge from March of this year that it would facilitate and not arbitrarily deny, restrict or otherwise impede, directly or indirectly, the transport or delivery of United States humanitarian assistance and US government-supported international efforts to provide humanitarian assistance to and within Gaza. It then goes on to list numerous targets that Israel must meet in order for the US military aid to continue to go to them, such as 350 trucks a day must get into and be able to deliver aid throughout Gaza, especially as winter is coming. And this must be happening at all 4 main points of entry into the Gaza Strip, including the north, but also the south. The US are also demanding humanitarian pauses be implemented to deliver said aid safely. Aid must no longer be stopped from moving on its way to Gaza from Jordan, as that crossing has been blocked, and the isolation of northern Gaza must be brought to an end. There's a lot more in it besides, far too much to detail in total in a video. It would go on for far too long. The full letter is, however, available as I found it on the Twitter feed of Axios reporter Barak Ravid, so do take the time to search that up and read the whole thing for yourself. It has been verified as the real thing. But the reason for this course of action now from the US, and as also referred to in this letter, is that Israel are now, only now, apparently you understand, in violation of US legal provision 620I of the Foreign Assistance Act, which in this instance demands that in order for aid from the US to continue going to Israel, military aid, the humanitarian aid trucks, which the letter references, that are being delayed, must be allowed on their way because the US now acknowledges that aid is actually being suppressed. The amount getting through is too little, and that is being reduced as well. Now, all this is all well and good. You might be thinking it. I might be thinking it. I damn well was thinking it, because it has already come out, and I'd already covered this point previously, that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has known aid trucks were being blocked for some time, and even lied to Congress all the way back in May that it was not being suppressed. And now he, it would appear, having been prepared previously to go to such lengths to shield Israel, that he's been made to, at this point in time, not 5 months ago when a lot more lives might have been saved and an invasion of southern Lebanon might not ever have begun, to warn Israel that they have to meet these criteria now in order to continue to receive arms shipments. Now, coming from a guy like Blinken as this is now, why should we put any faith in it? Why would he not just later lie that Israel had done as requested, even if they hadn't? Obviously, it looks like Biden has had the final word on this time. I can imagine Blinken being told to do as ordered this time around. Biden allegedly had some choice words to say recently about Netanyahu, but why should that matter? Why should that bear any weight, given what he is already allowed to be done, and the military aid already sent to Israel? We've got to that point where Biden is getting his backside kicked about all of this, and first and foremost is that people simply don't believe, despite the letter that Biden would deliver on this, is forced. Reinforcing that is the fact that for the next 30 days that Biden has given Netanyahu to make good on the demands of this letter, nothing is going to change at all. Why not cut them off now and stop them killing anyone until they meet these demands? There are 30 days for them to meet with compliance. It would put the right amount of pressure on them. But of course that predisposes us to believe that any of this is real, genuine, that any of this is with good intentions. Because it obviously isn't. And the reason that is so obvious is because in 30 days' time, Joe Biden will no longer be the president. So anything he says or does now is irrelevant, and Israel will know this too. This is pure optics with less than 3 weeks to go until the US elections on the 5th of November. After the 5th of November, it will be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and neither of them are beholden to anything Biden lays down by way of the law to Israel. He can posture like this now because he will never have to deliver, and he thinks people are stupid if we haven't noticed, and if you think that Biden would be held to promises or pledges he made as president, then you must have missed that US Supreme Court ruling that ensured Donald Trump could not be prosecuted for anything he did that could be deemed illegal whilst carrying out presidential duties. So it would also be the case for Genocide Joe. Harris is as much a Zionist as Biden, and Trump was notoriously close to Netanyahu when in power before, though I debate what he ever truly believes in, simply whatever suits him most one way or the other, one moment to the next. Either way, there's no pressure on either of them to put pressure on Israel, as Biden is on the face of it trying to do. The simple fact of the matter is nobody believes the US would do any of this anyway, be it in their own legislation or not, and Biden is still ensuring Israel will be armed by the US right up to his last day in office. Those armaments, it seems, may also include internationally banned ordnance in the form of cluster munitions, being used in Lebanon now as they are, and as one of the few nations to not ban such indiscriminate weaponry as the US has already proven by giving them to Ukraine last year. They seem the likeliest suspect in this incident too. Not only will they not stop arming Israel, but they'll sell them the very worst of the worst as far as civilian collateral damage goes as well. It makes you wonder if the US administration views Palestinians as any more human than Netanyahu's government does. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here, as you suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.